Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Let me tell you guys, we're living in some scary times, man. Some very, very, very scary times, okay? As Americans are struggling economically, okay? This country is struggling economically. And that is scary in and of itself. What's even scarier is when you have the government and some in the private sector trying to redefine common economic terms that we've all been using to accurately describe the state of the economy, okay? You literally have the government pissing on your leg and telling you that it is raining. That is what the Biden administration is trying to do, as they're trying to change the definition of recession. They were trying to do that ahead of the GDP numbers that have come out today, and we're going to talk about those GDP numbers and the Biden White House's response to those GDP numbers. But I just want you guys to remember, leading up into this, the Biden administration was literally trying to change the definition of inflation, and even some people in the mainstream liberal media weren't having it.
But I got to tell you, I struggle with this. I get that why they want to do it from a political perspective, but like, you can't fake this.
No, I was laughing to myself with the "in my view" thing that Caitlin highlighted, because it's like, well, in my view, I should be drafted into the NBA. Like the NBA executives didn't agree with that.
Of dollars, right.
Like, it doesn't really matter what you think. There is a technical definition: 2 straight quarters of negative economic growth. They clearly believe that that is likely to come to pass later this week. They're trying to pre-butt it. To your point, we get why they're doing it politically.
Right.
At the same time, we have these terms for reasons. You don't have to like it. Of course they don't like it, because the economy, Joe
Basically a textbook.
Biden's handling of the economy was at 25 or 30% in our most recent poll. Like, yeah, it's a problem for them. This adds to the problem. But you don't get to change the nomenclature in the middle of a campaign because it doesn't work for you.
Well, and again, your voters are going to feel what they feel in their lives,
Exactly
no matter what
That's
you say.
exactly
All right.
Well, apparently, if you're a Democrat, right, you do get to change nomenclature to fit your political agenda, because the mainstream liberal media has let the Democrats get away with this for a long, long, long time now, right? We've changed the definition of the word woman. We've changed the definition of the word assault rifle. We've changed the definition of the word pandemic, okay? We've changed the definition of the word coup. For the last 2 years, we have changed the definition of things to fit the Democrats' agenda. And all of a sudden, the mainstream liberal media seems to be drawing a line when it comes to the definition of the word recession that it looks like we are officially in.
Soon, and Edward Lawrence is going to have it. It is the GDP for the second quarter, and this is the first reading, which will get revised. Edward Lawrence has the number.
Yeah, this is a negative number for the second quarter. First reading, 0.9%. It's decreased 0.9%. So then again, the first quarter estimate, final estimate, was 1.6% decrease. Now we have a first estimate of the second quarter decrease of 0.9%. So if you look at the common definition of a recession, that is a recession for the first half of this year going back. Now, the Federal Reserve Chairman even said yesterday you have to take this with a grain of salt. He said it's going to be revised, but you can still look at the trend that is there. Atlanta Fed GDP Now said the estimate would be a little worse than this. It came in a little bit better, but again, still a negative number going forward. Now, the decrease in real GDP reflected private sector inventory investment and residential fixed investment, federal spending, state and local government spending, and non-residential fixed investment that were partly offset with increases from exports and personal consumption expenditures. Imports were subtracted from that calculation there again. So we are going to hear from the president later on today about the economy. We're going to hear from the Treasury Secretary in a rare news conference that she's going to have later on today. But again, we have now 2 negative quarters, the second one estimate of negative GDP growth, and that is the common definition of a recession. Maria?
Yeah, so according to the common definition that we all learn in basic economics, and the definition we've been using for about 100 years now, to define a recession, we are in fact in a recession. But if you listen to the President of the United States, he'll tell you the exact opposite.
That doesn't sound like a recession to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so as a small defense of Joe Biden, He probably doesn't even know what the definition of recession is, considering how he really doesn't even know where he is half the time in the White House. So I can't expect the guy to know the definition of recession. He's simply going out there and saying what he's been told to say, right? He's just reading from his script that his puppet masters have given him, right? That his handlers told him to say. So to really know what the Biden administration is trying to say here, we have to check in on their propagandist, which leads us to the White House's chief economic propagandist, Brian Deese.
We don't want to devolve into the recession label debate, but I do wonder, do you eventually expect the NBER to declare what we're in, a recession?
Well, we're certainly in a transition, and we are seeing slowing as we all would have expected. But I think if you look at the full data and the type of data that NBER looks at, virtually nothing signals that this period in the second quarter is recessionary. Obviously, in the labor market, 3.6% unemployment, but also 1.2 million jobs in the second quarter, 2.7 million jobs over the first half of this year. That's not what typical people or what the NBER would typically think of as recessionary. So as we look at where we are right now, the consumer continues to power forward with resilience, although at somewhat moderating levels, as you would expect. We are continuing to see businesses invest, and we're hopeful here that the legislation that we're contemplating, hopefully we can move forward with a strong CHIPS Act vote today, would actually provide some serious longer-term incentive for businesses to accelerate investment in the kind of areas where we absolutely need in this economy.
Yeah, so I want you guys to pay attention to the new talking point from the Biden propagandist, which is that we're in a transition, right? A transition. However, the question is, if we are in a transition, where are we transitioning to? Are we transitioning out of the official recession, or are we transitioning into something that could be worse, maybe even a depression?
Keep putting together.
Again, it's unfortunate. One of the clips, someone said that the second quarter data doesn't suggest we're in a recession. It actually suggests we're in a depression. Dagan, new home sales came out 2 days ago. Average home prices are down over $100,000 in just 2 months from April to June. Almost every economic data point that came out, it didn't miss. Most of these things didn't just simply miss Wall Street consensus. They missed by a country mile. I would be very, very afraid about, worrying too much about this recession talk because a lot of folks are going to soon be talking about depression talk. Let's figure out how to fix it. And by the way, stoking this thing with more money is how we got here in the first place. They need to stop forgetting about these so-called political wins ahead of the midterm elections and have a win for all of Americans once and for all.
Yeah, so as you heard that is Fox business analyst Charles Payne suggesting that we may be in a depression. So maybe the Biden administration is correct in the sense that, yeah, we're not in a recession. In fact, it's even worse, right? We may actually be in a depression, or at the very least, we're headed there, especially if the Biden administration keeps talking like this, in which they are basically proposing raising taxes in the middle of what is officially a recession.
Fourth, this bill requires the largest corporations to begin to pay toward their fair share in taxes by putting in place a 15% corporate minimum tax. Now, I know you've never heard me say this before. It will come as a shock to you, but 55 of the Fortune 500 companies paid no federal income tax in 2020. I know you only heard me say that about 10,000 times. But the fact is, they paid no taxes on an income, collective income, over $40 billion. Well, guess what? This bill ends that. They're going to have to pay a minimum of 15% tax on that $40 billion or whatever the number turns out to be.
With that being said, we got to check in on the next White House propagandist, the affirmative action propagandist, Miss Karine Jean-Pierre, who was not nearly as good at pushing propaganda as some of her colleagues, but nonetheless, she has to come out here and push the propaganda and say the talking points, even though she has no clue what the hell she's talking about.
Where we are today.
If things are going so great, though, then why is it the White House officials are trying to redefine recession?
No, we're not redefining recession.
If we all understand a recession to be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth in a row, and then you have White House officials come up here to say, no, that's not what a recession is. It's something else. How is that not redefining recession?
Because that's not the definition. That is not the definition.
Brian Deese said in 2008, of course, economists have a technical definition, which is of a recession, which is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth.
I can tell you this.
Yesterday he said 2 negative quarters of GDP growth is not the technical definition of a recession.
It is
What
not.
changed?
It is not.
Why did he say that
it
was?
is not. I can
What's the
I can
difference other
speak
than who the
to
president is?
I can speak to what he said yesterday in front of all of you, which is the last thing that you just repeated. There are many factors. There are many factors, economic factors and indicators to consider, and I will say that the textbook definition of recession is not 2 negative quarters of GDP. We have a strong labor market. We have business.
The economy is on all Americans' minds. Families are paying more at the grocery store, feeling the pain at the pump. And a new report out this morning shows that the economy shrank for a second straight quarter. And some say we are officially in a recession. Yet President Biden has said we are on the right path. A lot of Americans don't feel that way. So is there a disconnect here, and is it going to get worse?
Let me speak to the numbers that you just mentioned, that GDP number that you just mentioned. So if you look at prior recession, what happens before a recession in U.S. history, you see jobs lost, and that's not what we're seeing right now. Right now, we're seeing gains. 2.7 million jobs created in the first 6 months. 1.2 million jobs created in the last quarter. 3.6% unemployment. That matters. And when you look at it more broadly at the data, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing is that we are in a transition. We had this strong economic growth because of the work that this president has done in the past 18 months. And now what we're seeing is a transition into stable and steady growth. But we get it. We get that people are still feeling a little bit more pain. And so what you're going to hear from the president in the 12 o'clock hour, I hope your audience listens in and your viewers listen in. He's going to talk about how Congress is acting on this piece of legislation called the Inflation Reduction Act and what that's going to